Well, thank you very much again, everyone. Today we are focusing on the value of logistics in the manufacturing value chain. Michael Sharp, our National Director of Industry, is hosting the event. And over to you. Thank you, Sharpie.
Well, thank you, Kelly, and g'day to everyone all around the world. We've got so many people tuning into our Zoom seminars on the Smiley Curve, so we're really grateful to have you all. And I know that some of you are re-watching these on our YouTube channel, so we certainly encourage that, and more than happy to take questions over the coming weeks. So feel free to reach out to us at AMGC anytime. Today, I'd like to start by acknowledgement to country. And in the spirit of reconciliation, AMGC acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. We pay our respect to their elders past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. And today I'm coming to you from the mobile Zoom studio in North Tasmania at Burnie. So where I am in the car is right near the Elphinstone equipment factory, and I'm looking out over the Bass Strait, and it's a blue sunny skies right above us. So it's a good day to be in northern Tasmania. We've got some great speakers joining me today, and so I'll get into that. Also in Tasmania is Dr. Damien Stringer, who's the operations manager at Marinova. And it was great to visit Marinova last month and see some of the wonderful work that Damien and his colleagues are up to. Damien couples his technical expertise with a consultative approach to lead Marinova's laboratory, processing and research teams. Damien is a former president of the Tasmanian branch of the Royal Australian Chemical Institute. He's a graduate member of the Australian Institute of Company Directors and also the prestigious Tasmanian Leaders Program. Glad you could join us, Damien.
Thanks, Michael, and it's great to be here and be able to talk to you all today.
We've certainly turned it on in Tasmania. It was good to start the week down in Hobart. Yesterday I was in Launceston, and today in Burnie, and this morning I was in Penguin and visiting a great little company there by the name of Penguin Composites, who do some terrific work in defence and mining and others around specialised composite materials. But I can tell everybody out there that wherever I've been in Tasmania the last few days, people are busy, and I'm hearing that from right around the country. So I think that's pretty good news. But here we are in the modern technology, and with Zoom, we should have all bought shares in Zoom last year, shouldn't we? But I'm joined by Michelle Verdestonk, who's our Global Manufacturing and Procurement Director at Dyson. And Michelle is joining us from Singapore today. Michelle has 15 years industry experience and is currently involved with all that work at Dyson. Prior to that, Michelle held various management positions at Philips Lighting, at PepsiCo, the Ford Motor Company, and at Electrolux in Australia, Asia Pacific, Europe, and the USA. Michelle's a recognised thought leader in Industry 4.0. And for us at AMGC, it's important that Michelle is also an independent board director of the Advanced Manufacturing Growth Centre. Glad to have you here, Michelle.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Yeah, glad to be here as well. And it's great to join you guys all around Australia from Singapore as well. So look forward to it.
And so just overnight, you've had some changes there in the COVID restrictions again, Michelle. There's a bit of change going on.
Yeah, some precautional changes, some more restrictions, but I do think that as a country, Singapore is managing that quite well, just like Australia. So everybody's going through that. Yeah, and from a business perspective, a level of stability throughout the year was also a plus.
Yep. Yeah, well, it's been a funny year for everyone, but manufacturing like never before is certainly front and centre, and the whole world seems to be talking about manufacturing, which puts us all in a good place, I think. So today we're talking about logistics, which is step 3 in the Smiley Curve. And we know that logistics refers to the planning, the coordination, the management, and all the service functions needed to carry out the whole manufacturing process. But we've got a couple of slides here I think Kelly is going to put up. And then I'm going to ask a poll question at the start just to get your feedback out there. So welcome all of you to ask any questions. Just a reminder that we are recording these sessions so that you can watch them back at any time. Certainly encourage questions at any time throughout the session. Just use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and engage with our speakers. I'm happy to forward those questions around to our panel today. We know that manufacturing is transforming yet again. It started with Industry 1.0, the first industrial revolution back in the 18th century with steam power and everything we've talked about previously. And then we transferred to the second industrial revolution, or Industry 2.0. We think about Henry Ford, but in Australia, there is companies that are still growing further today. I think of AH Beard, who are a wonderful Australian company with operations in every state, manufacturing mattresses. And so the mass production of mattresses and global export opportunities, that family business continues to grow over all these many decades. Industry 3.0, the third industrial revolution. You've heard me talk about that. That's pretty much when I was at school. And I do remember being at the National Library in Canberra, and you had to book some time to get on this new computer that they'd set up to have access to this new World Wide Web, or the internet. And we knew that business was going to transform, and Bill Gates was putting out books about business at the speed of thought. But we certainly know that computers changed the game. And here we are today talking about Industry 4.0, or the fourth industrial revolution. And it's really this digital transformation of robotics and automation, smart sensors. It's a step change globally that people are adopting into their business. And so we have the 7 steps there that the agency research has borne out by talking to our members all across the country. And many of you have been engaged with our projects where we put this research into action. And we say it's much more than production. It's all these 7 steps that can create value in your business today. And so R&D we've talked about, and design, and today we're talking about logistics. So let's get into that. And Michelle, I think I might kick off with you because you've had a varied career, much more than just Dyson. And Dyson is such a substantial company on the global stage. But in your view around logistics, what are the highlights and what are the key drivers that you see out there that maybe people should point their attention to more?
Yeah, thank you, Michael, for that question. And I think a lot of the times when logistics was talked about, I think in your chart, it was demonstrated as well. In prior times, it's looked at as if it's a standalone servicing, right? So either it will be planning or it will be sourcing. And you would also see from organizational structure perspective, those functions typically are very much aside, either part of supply chain or part of procurement. They're not part of overall operations. They're very disconnected with the design part or the R&D part of the value chain. Through my experiences over the years, I have seen where logistics, so being planning or being sourcing, where it's done really well, they are the teams that are very connected, actually, with design and also with R&D. There are a couple of reasons for that. If I just use procurement or sourcing as an example, you could look at sourcing as a very tactical buying activity. However, if you treat sourcing as a very strategic part as your design process and your value chain, not only you will be able to design the components that are widely available and cost efficient into your products to make sure that from a continuity of supplier perspective, it's always there, or you're able to actually work very closely from the early engagement perspective with your suppliers to make sure you very much get that technology benefits by working very closely very early with your suppliers as well. So this is where, from a sourcing perspective, absolutely it needs to be very connected with upstream R&D, not only just from a cost perspective where they can deliver a lot of benefits, but I think in 2020 and 2021, everybody have experienced component shortages and still is. And this is where the differences will come out. Companies where have got their procurement teams very connected with R&D and with design would have got either 2 sources qualified in their design, so they're able to switch, or they would have very close coordination to make sure there are alternatives being looked at as everybody is going through the shortages, versus companies purely just have their procurement team buying things. So when there's constraints, there's really nothing to buy. This is where the companies that have made that connection between logistics and also other teams would benefit. And this is no different to planning as well, if we talk about integrated planning as well as a digitized transparency perspective. Yeah, so overall, I think that connection is really the key.
And so Dyson is globally famous for the design side, but what you're really saying there is it's a whole supply chain, talking to your suppliers and multiple suppliers to engage with the design team early on, because you might look at various materials. For example, the designer might not be aware of the latest material that one of your suppliers might have produced. I'm sure those collaboration efforts become really important.
Yeah, exactly. And I think companies that do well using the Smiley curve as the example is that it's a continuous Smiley curve, right? Rather than siloed approach. And I really think that integrated approach and early involvement of logistics and then later production is very important, and also making sure that the strategy set out in planning and in sourcing are very much aligned with your R&D directions, your technology directions, as well as your product design directions.
That's a really good point you raise there, Michelle, because if I think about Apple with the iPhone, by the time the next iPhone is out in the stores, they're already onto the next iteration, the next iPhone. So I guess they're engaging not just with their design team and their researchers and suppliers, but they're also engaging with the customers for that feedback. So it's the sales and marketing side too. So I was interested in your, it's really going back around again, and that Smiley curve is continuous. That's a very important point.
Yeah, and also I think it's hard to show it in a graphics way, but a lot, if you use logistics, which is our focus today, as an example, it's actually happening concurrent with R&D and also with design as well. And this is where the benefit really comes out, rather than a sequential type of activity. Yeah.
And so to you, Damien, if you wouldn't mind just giving us an overview of Marinova and the work you guys have been up to. I mean, you're winning awards, you're exporting, doing great things out of Tasmania. And can I say to everyone out there, right now the Made in Australia campaign is going gangbusters, but it seems to me that Tasmania itself is actually another level above. The whole world is looking to this state around the clean and green environment, and Marinova is certainly in the box seat for that. So over to you, Damien, just a brief overview.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Michael. So as operations manager of Marinova here, we look at a range of extracts from seaweeds and export those globally. So Marinova is a privately owned biotechnology company based here in Hobart in Tasmania. And the company came to be as a means to value add to the harvesting of what was a pest species of seaweed growing in Tasmania. So from its inception, the company had a strong R&D focus, and we developed a range of unique bioactive extracts from brown seaweeds that are used in human health settings. So from that initial development phase, the company is now grown and exporting our bioactive fucoidin extracts. It's a bit of a mouthful, to around 30 countries. And we are importing a significant amount of dried seaweed raw material to our facility here in Tasmania, where we undertake our proprietary extraction process. So logistics plays a fundamental role in our manufacturing here. And as a point there that tallies with what Michelle was saying, that multiple providers has been pivotal for us to maintain our activity through the pandemic and prior to that. So we focused on using sustainably sourced wild harvested brown seaweeds in our process. And as you can imagine, there's seasonality associated with that. And so we have to have a very intimate relationship with our suppliers and make sure that we have redundancy in supply, both geographically and then through the logistics channel as well, to maintain supply into this facility here. Relate that through to our customers who, for us, are in the business-to-business space, but ultimately making dietary supplements, cosmetics, functional beverages and the like that contain our bioactive ingredients.
And so just as an example, how many, rough ballpark, how many suppliers would you be dealing with, Damien? And Michelle, I'm going to ask you the same question. I know it'll be different because we're talking about a global company as against a business here in Tasmania, but it's be good to have your feedback on how many suppliers you're needing to deal with, Damien.
Yeah, look, I can be quite specific. If we're talking about the seaweed raw material themselves, that's a handful, about 4 major suppliers that we deal with, and they've been through an extensive validation process with us. But then broadening that out, we have a range of other suppliers that assist in the manufacturing. So obviously there's packaging and consumables associated with that manufacturing process as well. A lot of those are domestic Australian suppliers, but yes, the international supply chain for our seaweeds is limited to a very few number that meet our requirements, one of which is our organic certification.
That's high value manufacturing. That's what you guys are doing. It was terrific to see the facility and all that you're achieving. What sort of issues has COVID meant around your supply chains?
The general delays with containerised freight have been impacting on us, but I guess we went into the pandemic well placed because we had redundancy of supply and because we work on a seasonally harvested raw material. We have long-term projections for our manufacturing requirements and build up an inventory. So we're somewhat the antithesis of lean manufacturing. We need to make sure that we're insulated from supply chain shocks. It could be an environmental issue. In this case, it was a pandemic, but I guess we had identified that as a significant risk early on in our operations. And so we have significant warehousing and that reduced the impact of the pandemic, certainly in the early days. There are ongoing issues with supply and the delays with containerised freight, and beyond the pandemic with what happened with the Suez Canal as well, are slowing things down, but we've come in a strong position and managing as we can.
Yeah, no, well, that's good. I mean, again, the whole world is talking about manufacturing, and this talking and collaboration becomes a key driver, and we hear that from so many of our members right across the country. So thanks for that. I think now is probably a good time for the poll question. Kelly, if we can put up the question to everyone out there, and we're going to ask you to give us your feedback on, over the past 12 months, have you in your business, have you had to reevaluate and restructure your logistics planning? It's just a yes or no question, but it'd be great to get your feedback, and we can continue talking about some of the experiences here with Michelle and Damien. So over the past 12 months, have you had to reevaluate and restructure your logistics planning? So Michelle, maybe you could tell us a bit about your suppliers, and I know it's going to be broad, but any feedback on that?
Yeah, we've got hundreds, right? Just with the nature of the products we produce, we've got hundreds of suppliers. And of course, like many companies, we segment them as well from very strategic partners where we do a lot of the development work with, to very transactional ones as well from that perspective. Yeah, so there are a lot of them. And I do think with COVID, the challenges have been quite intense from last year to this year with different triggers. But last year, as the world is shutting down, as you could imagine, from different countries with different lockdowns, different shutting down of their businesses. We have waves of different suppliers shutting down and delaying the supply. So very much Damien's point as well, having the right amount of stock buffer was very important. I think this is where candid conversations with CFOs do occur about inventory holding cash flow versus not having components. So I think a lot of those discussions, a lot of companies would have been having as well last year. And I think this year, I think it's a compound effect. The whole container shortage around the world has not stopped. Port congestion has not stopped. And who would have guessed even Suez Canal got stuck? So anything that could possibly go wrong were going wrong. And also through the whole I guess consumer behavior changes over 2020 with different industries like gaming industries, home office related, computing, 5G, and etc. The whole demand on electronics just went through the roof, and I think it's been in the news intensively reported for the last couple of months on the shortages of electronics components. And I think it has really caught the semiconductor industries by surprise from the increase as well as the recovery of automotive industry as well. And to increase capacity at the front end for semiconductor is not a small task. You're talking about billions of investment, and you're talking about month, 2 years of lead time as well. So definitely that is a biggest challenge. I think it always goes into cycles, but this is probably the worst cycle everybody has seen. So definitely that is definitely a big challenge. Very much triggered initially with COVID, but also with different consumer behavior changes as well. So this is where also, when you manage a large amount of supplier base, be able to really zoom out and be able to look at the macro environment, the geopolitical environment, as well as all the adjacent industries is quite important to not necessarily predict, but at least have a good anticipation of what might be coming next, and be able to very much have the right strategy against it, not just for this year, but also for the next 2 years, 3 years, even 5 years out. Simply because when I do find when so-called crisis hits supply chain at the moment, it hits a lot harder. And the impact is a lot wider, and the losses are a lot more significant as well. So if the companies are not zooming out and tapping into the macro environment to really look forward to see how they can restructure their supply chain to meet those challenges, when you get caught, it's going to be hard.
Yep. Thank you for that. So how do we go with the polls? Let's get the responses there. Kelly, that'd be great. How did everyone go with that one? Here we are. So yes, overwhelmingly, 71% have had to reevaluate and restructure logistics planning. So that's not surprising, I don't think. And Michelle, it's interesting that just in the past couple of weeks, I'm hearing of a few more and more companies having issues with supply chains now. That, you know, the last 12 months during 2020, they were quite satisfied. They were on the phone to their various partners and it was working well, but we're just starting to hear now that there's some issues just coming through in the start of this year. So it's we need to be vigilant. We've got a couple of questions, which is great. So please keep these questions coming. Michelle, I'm going to start with you, if you don't mind, just on the technology side. And so people are asking what sort of technology can be used for managing the logistics side of the business?
I think a lot of the digital solutions are out there, right? And I think you have your transactional type of platforms where your SAPs or Oracles, different ERP systems, they are all very transactional to I guess keep the businesses going, and that has been out there for a long time. But what I do find now is if you think about the big conversation about Industry 4.0, it is always good to start with acquiring the data. I think a lot of the companies need to think about their process. If you still have very manual process, then it's very difficult to have that data collection digitally. So process itself needs to be very much streamlined and digitized so that data can be generated and also collected. And very much once you have the data, it's all about what do you do with it and the analytics you can do with that. And this is where I find a lot of the large typical transactional ERP providers like Oracles or SAPs are quite lumbersome in that. But there are a lot of SaaS providers out there that have very nimble and quite affordable solutions where are able to actually help with data analytics, especially in procurement or in planning. And also there's a lot of quite, I guess, open for use type of like Power BI, Tableau type of systems where if companies want to have their own data analytics and build dashboards and etc. themselves, that they could really leverage as well. And then it is also come down to how do you connect the data? Because I do think if you have your sourcing team or your procurement team looking at one set of data, then you have your planning team looking at another set of data, and they don't talk to each other, then I do think that the full benefit is not explored either. So from that perspective, once the companies have data and be able to collect that and be able to have the environment to analyze them, it's also important to see the most efficient way to connect them to give you that knowledge coming out of the data as well for decision making. So every company is different, especially from a size perspective, appetite for investment perspective on digital solutions. But there's so many solutions out there that are not expensive. You don't have to spend millions to have a large ERP transformation to get the benefits of it. And also, like I mentioned, Power BI or Tableau type of tools actually allow a lot of companies to set all these environments up themselves to get benefits out of it. But having that digital technology definitely helps with decision making, especially if the complexity of the operations is starting to increase when your Excel just can't fit anymore, or multiple Excels and multiple people sitting together for hours is happening too frequent. It's probably time to think about deploying some of the digital solutions.
So this is a good point. And Damien, I mean, as far as getting the data right, it's nothing better than picking up the phone and talking to people. That's been my experience, but we're talking a complex world these days, and so technology plays a more and more important role. We know that companies can engage with specialised logistics firms. You might employ a professional in your own business as a logistics professional. So there's many different ways in your own business to improve logistics and look at ways to innovate. But at Marinova, how does that look to you on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, look, Michael, that innovate word is key for us. So from the outset, we developed a unique extraction process. We were looking at a new bioactive ingredient that wasn't familiar in the West. And so the manufacturing processes, the logistics chain was not established. So we've got our own team of experts who have grown with the company, and we have an excellent logistics manager here who has her head well across the various regulatory regimes, ensuring that we can comply with import requirements, and also it's intimately linked to our distribution, so exporting our seaweed extracts and developing the appropriate frameworks and policies internally so that we can comply with global regulations across the food, cosmetic and pharmaceutical sectors. So yes, in the niche high-end market that we operate, we very much need those innovative specialists. And for logistics, we've got a great service internally, but then we do also need to engage with the services of freight forwarders and the like who can assist with that day to day. We don't have the number of staff required to keep track of the intimate details of the logistics chain. So we have some very good trusted logistics partners who assist with that as well.
That's good. And so how often would you have to review your logistics chains that way? Is that a regular thing, or is it a twice yearly process? Is there a formal way that Marinova looks at the logistics and reviewing that?
Yeah, look, there is. So, and that's mostly linked to our, I guess, our customer analysis. So for us, I guess, on the export side, and we're probably talking more distribution in the smiley curve here, but the customer experience for us as a business-to-business organisation is very much tied to logistics and on-time delivery of our products. And so we are constantly reviewing our customer feedback and ensuring compliance with our delivery expectations. And that's part of our quality management system and reviewed at least annually as a holistic approach. But
Damien,
that
must be a great process because you're engaging with your customers and getting that feedback. So that helps the overall business, I would imagine.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And I guess the final delivery of our products is somewhat out of our hands. So we're engaging with the global logistics supply chains here to use the big courier agencies around the world. And as a small Tasmanian enterprise, there's only so much weight that we can carry, but we talk very closely with our customers and make sure that they're getting the service that they need and doing what we can at our end to improve on that constantly.
And from your perspective, Michelle, what does it mean for a review of the logistics? You know, I guess things like the global slave trade, and how do you manage around those processes and engaging with your suppliers and managing that?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I do think sustainability and corporate social responsibilities are very high on the agenda of many companies, and no different to all the companies I've worked in as well. So definitely that is one area that the engagement with the suppliers are very intense. And also, I do think when you're managing a large scale, you do need to have the right process and right external partners in place as well. So when you just don't have that much internal resources to do all the auditing and the assessments, this is where you leverage a lot of partners like Intertech and a lot of other large auditing and assessment companies to help you with that. And I do think that more and more companies need to be embracing that as well, not just only from sustainability perspective, but also from CSER perspective, simply because when there are more companies, big or small, putting a lot of pressures on the suppliers to go through that, then the whole ecosystem will start to change, and also the whole ecosystem will become more open and transparent as well. So when you approach a new supplier, you would already be able to have a good transparency, and also if you may, almost like a rating system like your Uber, right, of other companies' testimonies on the CSER related issues or sustainability related issues already. So this is one area I'm personally quite passionate about. So it's not just about what my company does or my previous companies do, but it's about how the whole industry need to be very much endorsing that, embracing that, and also making that change together, so that whole ecosystem becomes more robust.
Sure, that's good. We've got some questions coming through, which is terrific. So please send your questions through and I can ask Michelle and Damien on your behalf. And thank you to Janine for your comments there, and great to have you on board. Janine asks, Michelle, is Dyson reviewing its plastic procurement and the subsequent product design around that? So I guess in a broader sense, we're talking about circular economy here as well. And we'll come to you, Damien, too, around what does circular economy mean at Marinova. But in this instance, Michelle, in particular with plastics, what does that mean at Dyson?
Yeah, good question. I won't be able to go into the details as you would appreciate. But I will talk in general about circular economy and sustainability. And I do think that we've actually been working on the on sustainability from day one. If you look at the design of our products, if you look at the plastic design of our products, we have had technology breakthroughs to have thin wall designs and etc. to very much reduce the usage of energy during the usage of our products. So a lot of the times when we think about sustainability, we very much think about the tangible, I guess, components, tangible material you could see. What we often forget is the most amount of energy usage or carbon is generated during the use of a product. And this is where we have focused a lot of our energy throughout the history of the company to very much focus on the optimization, the design to ensure that the energy usage is dramatically reduced, which in return reduces the carbon consumption side as well. Of course, the tangible side of our material and the whole circular economy is also very high on the agenda for us to achieve as well. So there are many different ways that has been looked through and in action as well to make sure that is in place. And also something that talking about the Smiley curve, very much eventually having that consumer part very engaged as well from the whole circular economy perspective. Yeah.
Well, the technology is catching up too, isn't it? I mean, we have more technology available to help in recycling these days, and it's becoming more and more bespoke. We've got some great research minds in Australia working around that technology. So the more we can design new technology for the circular economy here in Australia, we know that we have more global export potential for the technology, which can enhance global supply chains. I think it's terrific.
Yeah, exactly. And I think this is where, again, talking about the Smiley curve, how everything is linked. I think no sustainability agenda will be able to succeed if you want to do sustainability properly without the R&D and the design to be very much at the forefront of it, to embrace it. So this is where being a technology company, we're very much is into, which is to make sure our technology is right, designed right the first time for circular economy, for sustainability, rather than doing it as an afterthought. And
so to you, Damien, I mean, as I look out from the car here, I'm in Burnie and looking at Bass Strait. It's a beautiful, calm day, but you guys are harvesting seaweed around the coast of Tasmania. There must be issues around getting people out there to harvest the seaweed in the first instance. Tell us a bit more about that, because I find that fascinating.
Yeah, sure, Michael. So the company came to be because we were a species of seaweed was introduced to Tasmanian waters that was classed as an invasive pest, and a license was issued to go and collect that and then to try and value add to it. And that's how Marinova has transformed into making these high value bioactive extracts. So we commissioned a team of commercial divers to go and collect this wild harvested seaweed each year. And obviously sustainability is a huge part of that. So ensuring the ecosystem isn't disturbed by the harvesting practices. So it goes down to the manner in which the seaweed plants themselves are collected. And then that ethos drives the whole organisation. So it goes through the manufacturing process that we use here, which is built on green chemistry processes. So it's all water-based extractions here. And where we're looking at isolating this particular bioactive called fucoidin, which is a relatively small amount of the whole biomass of seaweed that we harvesting. So obviously we need to value add to the remaining seaweed that we're not using. So all of the solid waste that we generate here goes into making potting mixes and composts, and then the liquid byproduct from our extraction process, we're also collecting that and generating horticultural supplements from that as well. So there's the circular economy underpins the use of that seaweed. And you'd be familiar with the renewable energy sources that we're blessed with here in Tasmania. So we are operating on hydroelectricity, but we've also installed our own solar array here on our premises just to bolster that. So yes, sustainability practices are a big part of our organisation, and from that inception of our extraction process, it's been within the company from then on.
That's what you've just raised then is vitally important, because you're able to diversify your customer base into the garden, organics and the like. So that must build resilience into your business, and I guess that's an ongoing plan to really bolster all of that side too.
Yeah, there is, and look, it's a big focus area more generally. So biorefineries are a term that are often thrown around when you're looking at natural product isolation. So it's a continuous focus for us in the R&D space at looking at other bioactive components of seaweed biomass that we're looking at and ways to value add to it. So it's certainly not a static space. We're always looking to further enrich and value add to the unique resource that we have access to.
And I've got another question here. So to you, Michelle, is it becoming more important to locate manufacturing facilities closer to logistics and transport hubs? So does location play a key role, and how do you see that?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. I think for different companies, there's different drivers and different reasons. And of course, I think ecosystems, if you look at the automotive industry, it is very much about ecosystem, because they have the whole supply chain designed as just in time. So hence why it's very important to be co-located with your suppliers and very nearby. And of course, with the electronics crisis, it's proven that just in time might not be working nowadays anymore. So I do think even industries as big as automotive need to reconsider their supply chain from that perspective. And also, I do think the ecosystem and your supply base is not just the only thing to consider. Market growth is also another thing to consider. Customer behavior is also another thing to consider. Being close to customers sometimes is also a big driver for location, and also potential moves to be able to fill market growth is also another potential driver as well. So there are many reasons for companies to make certain decisions. And I do think if you think about the Smiley curve, I would think from Damien perspective, be able to have access to talent, to raw material is important as well. So really, if you explore the entire Smiley curve, you would actually find a lot of decisions could be very much made due to all the different stages of the Smiley curve, whether it will be customer, whether it will be access to research talent, or whether it would be raw material access, or whether it will be from a market distribution perspective. They could all be the series of drivers for that. And also, I do think even the same company go through different stages as well. I think with the poll question earlier about if companies have thought about changing or restructuring their supply chain the last year, I think there will be other drivers also due to things like the pandemic to make companies rethink about their manufacturing footprint per se.
And Damien, I know in Tasmania, this is where government policy can play a role, can't it? Because you might, for the benefit of our listeners out there today, talk about Tasmania has a equalisation policy for transport. How does that play a role in Marinova, and what do you hear from other Tasmanian companies as to how important that sort of policy play is?
Yeah, certainly. So Tasmania as an island state isn't the benefit of a national highway that links our state to other states. So as part of that, in recognition of that, the Australian government recognises that Bass Strait particularly is part of the national highway, and the cost of shipping from Tasmania to the mainland, or vice versa, is subsidised. And it's something that perhaps a lot of people in our northern states don't appreciate, the extent of which it costs a container to get from Melbourne, usually, down to Tasmania. It can be almost as much as getting to an Asian port, and it's a significant cost burden. And it does mean, and perhaps why Michael is spending so much time in Tasmania lately, that Tasmanian manufacturers themselves have to look globally and look at high value products, because that little bit of water between Tasmania and the mainland has been prohibitive for a long time, just because of the cost of reaching markets and of accessing raw materials. So there is support, policy support, as Michael has mentioned there, from state and federal governments to assist, but it is still a barrier for Tasmanian enterprises, and one that means that they have had to be innovative and look for higher value products for export.
It's always good to get down to Tasmania and walk the factory floors all across the state. Last month when I was here, Damien, I visited an ice cream manufacturer who had issues around supply with their cream. And I suggested, couldn't you get the cream across from Victoria? And they said, yes, that would be fantastic and that would work, except we really value Tasmanian produce and we promote our business as being Tasmanian made, and they create the value from that. And so that's another perspective in your business, I'm sure, with Marinova, having the fresh waters around Tasmania and being able to promote that clean and green environment. That must be vital to the way you promote Marinova.
Yeah, it is, absolutely. So Tasmania has benefited from that clean and green image, and the Tasmanian government over generations have looked to build on that image with Brand Tasmania and the like. And it does assist, and it's something that is of constant maintenance. So there are efforts within the state government here and industry bodies to make sure that clean and green status is maintained and that premium can be retained. And yes, as an island state, producers do tend to look locally and source for local ingredients wherever they can. And it does bolster the brand and gives us one extra marketing leverage, I guess, that assists even exporting internationally. Tasmania is starting to be well known.
Well, in more ways than one. I mean, food production is very big business here in Tasmania, but one of the things that's growing, as you know, Damien, is the whiskey production. And the companies down here in Tassie are winning global awards for their very fine whiskies. Companies like Lark and many others are doing great things, but we also have the fabrication and the engineering firms producing and helping to establish the manufacturing process around that. And now we have engineering firms that are exporting the stills that they're manufacturing here in Tasmania. They're going over to the USA because the fact that they're making these really fine world-class whiskies right here in Australia. It's a good news story.
It is, yeah. So the interconnected, and that's part of that looking local. So some of those distilleries have looked to commission their own stills, and it drives entrepreneurship in other sectors.
It sure does. And we have a question here from Reed Ossington. So I'm going to throw this to you to start with, Michelle, and we'll come back to you for the same question, Damien, is around the people side of things. And Reed asks, what new knowledge or professional development do you see that people in the logistics chain will need in the future to take advantage of Industry 4.0? So what sort of skills development, Michelle?
Yeah, I think I'll start from data analytics. I think a lot of the times people look at data, but they don't analyze the data for decision making. So data analytics skills will become fundamental for people who work in planning, in sourcing. So rather than a very transactional type of data nature, transitioning that very much to be able to understand the data, see the trends in the data, and be able to make decisions. That is going to become a prerequisite in this area in the coming years, if not already happening in certain areas from that perspective. And also, so that will be very fundamental from a data perspective, and also then, to link to what I said from the very beginning, the ability to understand upstream and downstream will be a skill set that is well needed in logistics. For the reason that it's no longer a very transactional service type of teams or functions. It is an integral part of a lot of companies, and definitely an integral part of the success in supply chain. So the ability to understand what happens upstream from R&D and design perspective, and all the way down to production and distribution and to customer. I think that will be very necessary, especially for the leaders in this field, to be able to go all across the smiley curve. Will be the very fundamental skill set needed.
So I've got to tell you both that, and I asked you earlier if you've got any books or podcasts that you might recommend, and I've got one for everyone out there today, because it was a real great opportunity to visit Incat when I was in Hobart a couple of days back. And Robert Clifford is the founder of that company, and it's been going for many decades now. And the shipyard in Hobart is going gangbusters. It was terrific to walk through one of the ships that's under construction at the moment. They're doing great stuff. And there is a book that I've read, and I've got it at home in the library, and the title of the book is The Bastards Are Genius. And it's a story of Robert Clifford, from schoolboy dunce to shipbuilding entrepreneur. I highly recommend it. It's a great read, and to be able to walk the factory and talk to his employees down there and see how far that business has come, that's true entrepreneurship, and it's right here in Tasmania. It's a good story. But back to you, Damien, around the professional development in logistics. Do you have any comments around that?
Look, I guess coming from a small business perspective, where we operate on that global footprint, just having the cultural awareness and the soft skills to be able to work with a diverse range of suppliers who have potentially different values to what we do, and be able to maximise those relationships, it's pivotal for us. So yeah, some of those softer skills are something that I'd suggest in an SME type role as being quite pivotal.
And we've got a question here around, do the panelists think that ISO requirements are helpful to ongoing business viability, or do you see them as creating problems? I think that fits in here around, what do you think about the ISO requirements and building what's needed for the business in the logistics sense? Maybe to you, Michelle?
Yeah, I really think ISO requirements are almost the basics, right? And of course, I think when you work in maybe Damien's field, which is highly compliance driven, then that makes that is even more important. Even just for any other business, I would have thought ISO is very much fundamental basic process compliance, I guess, foundation to get us started. Definitely it is something that will drive the fundamental layer of structure and process and compliance. And most of the companies, actually a lot of the companies, big or small, then build on top of that and then have requirements internally that is much higher than ISO. Right. So this is where, to me, it's a fundamental prerequisite from that perspective.
Yeah, sure. And so I'm going to ask you about the books and the podcast now, guys, but we will put a link up to the book that I mentioned about the Robert Clifford story, titled The Bastards Are Genius. We'll put a link on the YouTube channel site for everyone to be able to download that from Amazon, or maybe it's an audio book, who knows? So Michelle, any good books or podcasts that you get involved with or recommend?
Yeah, the book I'm currently reading is called Invent and Wonder. It's a collection of writings by Jeff Bezos. So it is Amazon. So very much, I think. Yeah, we're faced with so many challenges in supply chain. I think there's nothing better in reading about the man who actually runs one of the best supply chains in the world, what he's thinking is not just from a business perspective, also from his personal perspective. It talks a lot about his personal disciplines and principles as well. And one really catches my mind was about how that he likes to make decisions in the morning, and he makes one decisions, and rather than being involved in everything, because he's very much in the mind that he is there to make important decisions, and everyone else in the company is there to be accountable to make other decisions. So that ability to actually understand the roles and responsibilities, to delegate and be able to respect and give the empowerment and accountabilities to your people to make certain decisions in a very complex organization or enterprise is quite important.
That is focus, isn't it? And yeah. To you, Damien, any good reads?
Yeah, look, I wasn't thinking necessarily a read, and probably not news to anyone on this audience, but I really enjoy Simon Sinek and his podcasts about the why of it, and that's been something that's really driven us.
So I think we've got a bit of a delay there with Damien, which is fine. We've got you back there, mate, but we heard that podcast and we will put that up as a link as well. So thank you for your recommendation. The joys of modern technology, from Singapore, where Michelle is, and here in Burnie, in northern Tasmania, to Damien down in Hobart. So great to have you here to join me today. And I know that our members really appreciate you both taking the time to join us. We've got some slides to close out just to recap where we are and some of the points we've raised today. So Kelly, if we can have those slides, and we'll talk about what we've got coming up for the rest of the smiley curve. So just at a glance, we know that it's the third step, and I highly recommend you look at our website and see some of the projects that we've been doing that cover our research. Logistics does refer to planning and coordination, the management and service functions needed to carry out the whole manufacturing process. We know, and we heard from our speakers today, that it covers everything from the purchase of raw materials right through production of product, and then taking our product out to the world. Efficient logistics processes can help your manufacturing company not just lower costs, but also increase productivity, enter into different markets and global supply chains. And of course, you always hear me talk about collaboration. So we did touch on that today, and I'm always going to tell you to get out there and talk more and meet more people and do everything you can to collaborate with other companies that can assist your business to grow. So that's been a great conversation today. I hope you can join us for our future sessions, where we'll talk about the value of production. We'll talk about distribution. Certainly sales, is a passion of mine, and the value of services. We're seeing more and more companies adding service models into their business. So again, I'm grateful to our panel today. Thank you for joining us. If you're not a member of AMGC already, I highly recommend you get on board and join the Advanced Manufacturing Growth Centre. Check out the Manufacturing Academy, which now also features Professor Veena Sahajwala talking about the circular economy. And you'll hear all about her latest research and how you might want to look at that for your business. Of course, the COVID-19 Manufacturers Response Register continues to go from strength to strength. So please take a look at that and get involved wherever you can. As always, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn and ask any questions. Give me a call, send me an email. At AMGC, we're ready to help you in any way that we can. So thank you again, and we'll see you all in a couple of weeks. Bye for now.